All right, here we go in part two in our layers section. Just to give you just a brief recap, last lesson we basically just added this photo layer, and we talked about some stacking ideas in terms of where to stack certain layers with respect to the other layers and where they go. All right, now we're going to talk about a lot about blending modes today, and a lot about locking layers and those kinds of things. So we've got currently, if you don't have your picture set up the same way mine is, make sure it is. Make sure your layers are set up the same exact way. First thing we're going to talk about, if you look up top in your layers palette, you've got two buttons up here. One of them is a drop-down menu called blending mode. And you've got all these different blending modes. There's so many different blending modes. We're not going to cover all of them. We're actually just going to cover a couple of them. But understand, when I talk about blending modes, that's where I want you to go, is this drop-down menu here. The other piece to the puzzle here is opacity, and that's how you pronounce that. It's called opacity. And that's basically a blending mode based upon the layer that you're on. So as I look at this, and I've got my letter layer, I've selected my letter layer and I drag on opacity. Watch the letter layer as you drag down, and what you'll see is you can basically pull up the color, either slide down or up on this slider, and it'll basically blend that letter into the other layers or not. Obviously, if I'm way over to the left, you don't see the letter layer at all, but it's still there, you just don't see it. As I go all the way to the right, anytime you have 100% opacity, that's the full luminescence of the layer. So we're going to mess around with these real quick. We're also going to mess around with the sub menu up here. As I look, you'll see the layers palette or the layers menu. I've got the letter selected again. So anything that I choose to click in here, and you'll see some of these have some pretty powerful functions. Some are pretty straightforward. The merges I'll talk about. Flatten image I'll talk about in a second. Obviously these up here, new layer, duplicate layer, delete hidden layers, those are all pretty self-explanatory, and we'll cover some other stuff in here too as well. Alright, so that's pretty much where we're going with this. We are going to work with the paper texture layer, and we're going to bring that opacity down on the paper texture. So just make sure the paper texture layer is selected, and we're going to pull the opacity down to about 50%. And you'll see that paper slowly go away. Now, if the dragging is getting to you, you can actually go up into the box and type as well. So I can go up in there and type, oh, we don't want 500%. And I'll go up and type 50%. And you'll see the paper texture, you'll see the blue background is starting to blend through the paper texture now. A little bit too much, so we are going to change some things. Okay, so we're going to go up into the blending mode, and we are going to grab the very last one called Luminosity. Go ahead and select that. Makes it a little bit brighter, shines the background. So in essence, this text layer, the texture layer, is more luminous, which means it lets the blue of the background shine through. And we're going to pull the opacity up to its final resting spot of 75%. So what was once its own brown layer now has kind of a blue tint to it. So it kind of gives it a cool little feel in terms of using the luminosity. Alright, so I'm going to hit enter, click off on the opacity, and we're going to move to something called linking layers. From time to time, you're going to want to be able to do something to multiple layers at once, and it would be kind of a pain to actually have to select each layer individually, change something about it. So what Photoshop allows you to do is to actually link layers together. I am going to grab the photo layer, and from previous units I would tell you, in order to select multiple things, there's two keystrokes, and hopefully they're in the back of your mind right now as I'm talking to you. If you want to include everything in succession in the layers palette, you would hold down the shift key and then click the last layer that you want. What shift will do will select the first layer you selected, everything in between, to the last layer that you select by holding the shift key. If you just want individual layers, I will click on the shell layer, then I will hold the control key and click on, say, the letter layer, and that'll allow you to choose multiple layers just based upon what you want. Notice the photo layer, which is in between these two layers, is not selected. If I held down the shift key, the photo layer would be selected as well in the grouping. So you get the point. So in order to do this, we're going to click on the photo layer, and I'm going to hold the shift key and click on the letter layer. And what we're going to do is we're going to link these two layers together so that whatever I do next will affect both layers. I'm going to go up to my layer palette, my layer menu, and you will see about 2/3 of the way down there's a link layers command. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. You'll notice, let me click off here so you can see them. Well, you'll notice two little chain links here, which basically means now everything that I do, I'm on photo, but watch letter. I can, whatever I do to the photo layer, the letter layer is going to come with me. Alright, so we're going to actually, let me step backward and make sure I'm in the right spot here. We're going to actually resize both these layers together. So I've got the link. You also get the link button here, by the way, too. And again, Photoshop gives you 15 different ways to do something. I just did it by using the layer palette. I could have just clicked on the link layers right here. It would have done the same exact thing. So here we go. I'm going to shrink these two. They're a little bit big, so I'm going to go into Edit, and I'm going to go to Transform, and I'm going to go to Scale. So you've seen this panel before. We worked with this in the veggies with the cutting board, and all I'm going to do is hold down the Shift key to keep it proportional, and I'm going to shrink this probably up to about 75% of what it first was, give or take. You'll notice the transform box is up. I am going to, in order to get out of the transform box, you remember you can either hit the check mark here, or if you hit the enter key on your keyboard, you're out of transform mode. And what I want you to do is kind of pull down on the letter, so we've got a good chunk of space, and make sure the shell is both over the letter and the photo at the same time. So there we go. We've got some space up here. We're going to put some stuff up here. I can unlink those just as well as I did link them. Now they're in their final resting spot. I've still got them linked. I'm going to go up to my menu, and I'm just going to say unlink. So again, linking layers allows you to do one command to multiple layers at the same time. And you'll see this to be true when we start messing around with layer styles as well. Alright, one more thing I'm going to do here. We're going to add, notice the first time I added a layer with the photo, I actually just pulled the photo in, and it created a new photo layer. You can create a new blank layer at any given moment. So our next step is we're going to add what's called a gradient to the background here, but we're going to put the gradient on its own level, on its own layer. I'm going to go back up to my layer menu, and I'm going to say new layer. And it'll ask me a question. Okay, what do you want to name it? And all of these, typically, if you just want a blank layer, don't worry about changing these things. But for now, I'm just going to click OK. And there's my new layer. If you don't specify where the layer goes, it's always going to go on the top. If I wanted to add a layer above the photo layer, I would click on the photo layer. Another place to put a new layer in is down here in the bottom right of the menu. It says create new layer. Watch where this new layer goes. The new layer will automatically enter above the layer that you had selected. So two different ways to skin a cat there. I don't need two new layers, so I'm going to click on layer 1. I'm going to get rid of layer 1. I'm going to click on the trash can. I'll say yes. And I've got layer 2 above the photo layer. We actually want to put that layer, where do we want to put it? Its final resting place is going to be above the paper texture. So I will drag that down above the paper texture. And I don't like the name, layer 2, so I'm going to double click. Sorry about that. Double click on the name, and I'm going to call it gradient. But you'll notice the show view button is on, so the layer's on, but it's absolutely blank. If I was to turn off all layers, you would see that the gradient layer has nothing on it just yet. So let's work with it in this mode real quick. We're going to add a gradient to this layer. So I'm going to click on the gradient tool, which is under the paint bucket. I am going to make sure I have a linear gradient over here on, and I'm going to choose the gradient from the drop down. I am going to choose this one coming in from the first row, foreground to transparency. And you'll notice my foreground color is brown right now. I want you to click on the brown color palette, which is your foreground color, and I want you to pick any green you like. Just make sure it's green because it's got to blend in the modes with the rest of the layers. I'm going to click OK. And basically this is the gradient I want to have happen. Okay, let's make sure that the reverse is off. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from the bottom right corner, and I'm just going to drag right up into the middle of the picture. And you'll see a slight green gradient appears. Actually, I'm going to expand this. I wanted it to do more, so I'm going to actually drag now. I just undid it, and I'm going to go all the way up the picture this time, so I get more of the green gradient coming across. So you got your green gradient there. You'll notice on the icon, on the little icon for the layer, you'll notice it actually appears on the icon. Let's turn everything back on. Let's see what this did. So obviously I look at this and I say, here's this green gradient, and it not only affected the background, but it also affected the paper texture, and that's because the gradient layer is above these two pieces. Notice that the gradient did not affect the shell, the letter, or the photo. Okay, and again, just thinking about how your layer stacking is going to affect layers underneath it. So we got a gradient in there. It's actually a little bit too bright, so I'm actually going to double click on the layer, not on the name because that'll change it. Well, actually, let's not do that. Let's just change the opacity of the gradient layer down to 75. Just to give us a little green tint, but not overwhelming on the blue. So we got our opacity down to 75, and we're going to actually change the blending mode as well on the gradient layer. We're going to go to multiply. You'll notice what that did. It kind of combined the two layers below, where we've got this green texture below with a little bit of green and blue blended in together, and the top is untouched with the same blue color. Perfect. We're almost done this lesson here. We're going to add some text in here real quick. So we're going to need another layer. But the funny thing about the text tool, if I click on the text tool, we're going to add some text up here. You get your horizontal bar. Notice you get a vertical type tool, and then you get some masking tools we'll talk about a little bit later. But I want you to be on the horizontal type tool, and I want you to click anywhere in the picture, right about here, let's say. Text, like photo and like putting in new layers, automatically creates what's called a text layer. So you don't have to, if you're going to put text into a picture, understand you don't have to put a new layer in. The minute you just click into the picture, you see my I-beam right here waiting for you to type. It adds its own layer. We're going to put some text in here. Let's choose, let's go with, let's see. It's kind of weird, but if you go down into the G's, you'll see the one I'm looking for. This Adobe Garamond Pro. It's kind of funny because it's the only one that's not really alphabetical. If you click on Adobe Garamond Pro, we'll use that as the text. Let's see what else. We are actually going to use, we'll say 76 points. So I'm going to type in there 76. Notice I haven't typed anything yet. So I'm changing things before I go. And then we're going to use italic. And then I'm just going to type in the word. Oh, I'm still in green. Let's make sure the text color is black. And let's change the anti-aliasing to crisp too. And I'm going to start typing. Scrapbook is the word I want. Scrap. You'll notice the text comes up in the exact font you want, italic, 76, and crisp. If I wanted to change this now, let's say I didn't like the font, all I would have to do is highlight the text, and I can go up here and change what I want. But in any case, my text is there. You'll notice that your layer is still named Layer 1. You've got an underline here underneath the text layer. And if you look, your check mark, that infamous check mark that comes up on the transform piece is up here as well. Basically, text needs to be rasterized. Same thing as transform. In order to get out of transform mode, you've got to go ahead and click on this check, or you got to hit enter. Text is a little different. You have to click on the check. If you hit enter, it's going to put a blank line in between the two lines, which you don't want. So the enter key for getting out of transform mode does not work with text. I must hit the commit layers. Watch what happens to the name of the layer the minute I hit the commit text edit. Boom. I hit commit text edit, the check mark goes away, my underline goes away. More importantly, my text layer gets automatically named to what the text is that you put in there. So there's my text layer. It's in the wrong place, obviously, so I'm going to move it. You'll notice that Based upon where the text layer is, if I put it here, the P, the underscore, is underneath the letter. So I don't want to have that happen. I want the text to actually look like it's floating on top of the letter. So I'm going to pull this all the way up to the top, underneath the 2. And now the word scrapbook looks like it's pulled up over the letter. And I'm going to move this slightly to the right. And I'm just kind of looking at how I'm gauging this. And I'm going to move the letter. I'm going to relink the letter and the photo because I want to move these together. And I'm going to move those slightly to the right as well. So now it kind of looks like that right there. All right, perfect. Let me unlink these two. And we're going to stop here for now and come back a little bit later.